What is up, fellow nerds, and welcome back to the Dapper Snapper Gaming channel, and welcome back to How Do I Want to Do This? This is our series where we take a look at all playable options available to players in Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition, then we rank them on a scale of 1 to 10 and either build them or fix them depending on how they rank. Now this week we start our subclass series on the Sorcerer with the Aberrant Mind, one of the fan favorites ever since it was introduced here somewhat recently, and I'm excited to take a look at what some Mind Flayer powers can look like on a playable character. But before we jump into it, make sure to leave a like on the video and subscribe if you haven't already. Of course, make sure to share the video with your friends and click the bell so you're notified when new videos are uploaded. Now, for those of you who've been watching for a while, you may notice that I'm sitting in a bit of a different position today, and this is temporary just for this week. I'm still in the middle of remodeling. You know, last week I said I was going to be remodeling over the weekend, and we did that. We did some painting and a bunch of fun stuff, and including one other really cool upgrade to the office. So yeah, I think this is pretty cool. So yeah, we have colored lights now, which I think is cool, and I think it could be an interesting part of the upcoming series as we continue talking about this. We can have different colored lights every week. It'd be cool. It'll be fun. Just another way to engage. So we're gonna rock with blue today, and we're gonna see just how it goes. But either way, Aberrant Mind Sorcerer. I'm super excited to be talking about this one because you get to be kind of a mind flayer, sort of, or at least a mind flayer influenced you. There are several ways that you can go about this, but you get these psionic abilities that you can use to really make yourself quite powerful. But how powerful are you in comparison to other sorcerers? Let's find out. So starting off at level 1, we get psionic spells, and this is interesting. It's an expanded spell list, similar to something like what we saw on the cleric a while back. I'll put that up in the iCard above for you. But what's really interesting is that this is one of only 2 sorcerers that actually can do this. The Clockwork Soul is the other, which we will be talking about next week, but Aberrant Mind Sorcerer gets the ability to take extra spells, which is pretty cool. So how does this work? So with this, we get 2 spells per spell level whenever we get to 1st, 3rd, 5th, 7th, and 9th level. Of course, you've got that chart on your screen for you to look at. And what's also cool about this is that if we don't want one of these spells, whenever we reach a new level in Sorcerer, we can actually replace one of them with any divination or enchantment spell from the Sorcerer, Warlock, or Wizard spell list. And honestly, this spell list is pretty great, honestly. The Arms of Hadar is a really nice first level option. Dissonant Whispers isn't bad. Hunger of Hadar is nice. Sending. I really like Telekinesis as well. There's a lot of really good stuff here, but you're also open to do whatever you want to do in switching these out. The enchantment spell list and the divination spell list are both pretty broad. Enchantment I definitely think is a little bit better in this case, and it's really cool. One thing to think about is you could take something like Hex here, which could be wild, right? I think Hex is a great spell that you would get without having to multi-class into Warlock, so really cool. And of course there are tons of other amazing options. We also get a free cantrip here with Mind Sliver, which is also great. So I mean, if you think about this, we're essentially doubling the number of spells we're going to get in our first 10 levels, right? At 10th level, we normally would only have access to about 10 spells, and now we have access to another 10. And that's kind of wild, especially with how much customizability we have with this. Yeah, I mean, I normally, when I'm looking at these kind of spell lists, I'm thinking, okay, how is it in comparison to some of the others? Well, for most of the others, it doesn't exist, which makes this really great. This has to be a 10 out of 10. I don't know how to go any lower on us getting free spells that are really valuable and the ability to switch them up whenever we get a new level just because we want a different flavor. Also at level 1, we get telekinetic speech and free telepathy. Why not, right? So as a bonus action, we can choose one creature within 30 feet of us, and we get 2-way telepathic communication. We can speak within a number of miles of each other that are equal to or less than our charisma modifier. Now, you do both have to have a language in common, which is fine, but it does last for a number of minutes equal to our sorcerer level, which honestly is probably going to be plenty most of the time, and there's no limit to how many times that we can do this. Telepathy is always something that is going to be useful, right? So many races that get it are considered very powerful, so many classes that get it, subclasses, and this is no exception. You really take off a lot of the restrictions with this one, and it's just a bonus action. The biggest thing about this is that it is two-way communication. Most of your telepathy features are only going to be one way, and so this means you can actually split the party and still be able to talk to each other and say, hey, we're getting attacked, come help us. And the other party can let you know, hey, we're on our way, or we're dealing with something, and you can tell what's going on. Very, very useful, honestly, and this earns it a 9 out of 10. I really think that telepathic communication is super useful in the majority of campaign settings, and getting it with this many training wheels taken off is really nice. At level 6, we get Psionic Sorcery, which makes us a little bit more flexible when it comes to certain spells that we cast. So with this, we actually just take a look at the list of spells that we got back at level 1, and we actually can cast them using either spell slots or by using sorcery points, a number equal to the spell's level. If we use the sorcery points, we also get to remove the verbal and somatic components, and we also get to take away the material components as long as they are not consumed by the spell. So essentially what this means is you pay the cost of whatever the spell is, and then you get subtle spell thrown on top of it. Now, to me, I don't know that this is the most broken thing ever. Yes, by and large, it's going to be a discount because subtle spell is only 1 sorcery point, so it's pretty cheap already. But I don't know that I would want to necessarily burn a bunch of sorcery points if I don't have to. Now, if I've got sorcery points to burn and I'm out of spell slots, by all means, this is great because it then saves your bonus action. You don't have to convert them, and of course that conversion rate is not really in your favor, so this does help out with that. Ultimately, it does work out in your favor most of the time, but I don't know that this is something that I would necessarily spam a lot. I don't think that it's really worth it using all the time. For that reason, I'm going to give it a 7 out of 10. I think it's good. I don't think it's a bad thing to have, but I definitely don't think that this is something you should rely on or really use a ton. I'd probably still just pack Subtle Spell. Also at level 6, we get Psychic Defenses, and this actually gives us resistance to psychic damage and advantage on saving throws to resist both the Charmed and the Frightened effects. These are great, right? Here at 6th level is a really nice time to be getting access to something like this. Not so much the psychic damage. I mean, it's nice, but it doesn't come up a ton outside of certain types of monsters. So maybe in your campaign it'll be great. In most, probably not so much. But the Charmed and Frightened resistance is really nice to be getting at level 6. That's really on the front end of when you're going to be dealing with creatures that are going to start throwing those types of effects at you. And that's really nice, right? The last thing you need is to get charmed and then fireball your friends. That's the last thing you need, right? And so I think it's great. I think it's a very effective, simple, and nice thing to have. Ultimately, it's an 8 out of 10. It's a little boring, but I mean, it's still functionally very good, so I really can't complain too much. At level 14, we get Revelation in Flesh, and this gives us the ability to activate one of a pretty decent list of features as a bonus action by spending a sorcery point. So with this, of course, like I said, we can use our bonus action to spend 1 or more sorcery points, depending on what it is that we're using, to transform our body for 10 minutes. And these effects are pretty cool. We can see any invisible creature within 60 feet of us as long as it isn't behind total cover. You gain a flying speed with hover, which is awesome. You gain a swimming speed equal to twice your walking speed and can breathe underwater. And finally, we can become this like amorphous type of thing and just be able to squeeze into spaces that are as narrow as 1 inch without squeezing, which are all pretty cool, honestly. I think that the transformations are nice. I think that the flavor here really works well. And functionally, it works really well, honestly. This is concentration-free flight at the cost of a bonus action and 1 sorcery point. which is pretty great, right? You can definitely tell that this is from Tasha's, because that's when they started doing this to a lot of your subclasses. So I'm really happy with how this turns out. Now, let's not discount the swim speed and the breathing underwater. That's also really good, depending on your campaign. If you're dealing with a bunch of sea creatures, or you're dealing with some kind of a marine section of your campaign, this is definitely going to come into play much, much more than flight would. And the others are fine. I probably would not focus on them nearly as much unless you know that there are invisible creatures around, or that you need to get in this really tiny space. I think that those are going to be a little bit more niche, but still could come into play for sure. Overall, the flight alone is really good and earned this a 9 out of 10. I think that anything like this is going to be great. Yes, we have a 1 sorcery point cost, so yes, it's more than some of the other subclasses that do get flight around this time, basically for free. But ultimately, this is a little bit more flexible, and so I think that this ends up evening out ultimately. Finally, level 18, we get Warping Implosion, which is basically Thunderstep, except very much on steroids, and it's interesting in how it works. So with this, as an action, we can teleport to an unoccupied space that we can see within 120 feet of us. Immediately after we disappear, every creature within 30 feet of where we left has to make a strength saving throw. If it fails, it takes 3d10 force damage and is pulled straight towards the space that we left, ending in an unoccupied space as close to it as possible. If the creature saves, then of course it takes half as much damage and is not pulled. We can do this once per day for free, and after that we have to spend 5 sorcery points in order to do it again. Now this effect is pretty cool. It's really expensive, but it's cool, right? I don't know that I would spend 5 sorcery points on this if I didn't have to, if I'm not in a situation that really calls for it, because that is a lot. But still, here's kind of where I think about this and where the power in this really lies, is that it has this vortexing effect, right? And so you can throw this down if you are surrounded by several enemies, draw them into a central point, and this is not a spell, right? This is not a leveled spell. Therefore, if you cast a leveled spell as your bonus action with Quicken spell, then you are still well within the rules. And that's where the power of this comes in. So you draw them all together, and then you Quicken spell, I don't know, Fireball, Hypnotic Pattern, you name any of your other amazing AoE spells, and just roast them or incapacitate them or whatever it is that you want to do. That's really where the power in this lies, and I think that it actually is pretty cool. I think it actually works pretty well. The biggest issue I have is that it doesn't come online until level 18. That's really, really late, because by this point you're going to be dealing with incredibly powerful beings, and so, you know, things that are just going to fail a little strength save, you know, and yes, your DC is probably going to be high because hopefully you have your charisma maxed out by this point, but still, this is 18th level. Most people are not going to get this far, and so, I don't know. I don't know that this is really a fantastic way to cap off this subclass. Overall, I'm going to give this a 7 out of 10. I don't think that it's the best way to cap this off. It's good, but there are others that are a lot better. So where do we land on the Aberrant Mind Sorcerer? This thing's pretty cool, right? And honestly, I think that the rankings as this subclass goes really are not the best as far as giving you an accurate ranking as far as it goes. So I think the overall is going to need to fix that. The biggest factor for me, the driving factor behind what I have to rank this, is our expanded spell list. There is only one other subclass that gets this, and that's the Clockwork Soul from the same book, and again, we're talking about that next week. That is the only other exception. Every other sorcerer is stuck with whatever the normal list is, and the list is limited. And that's one of the biggest drawbacks of the sorcerer class, is the limited number of spells. This completely fixes it, which is kind of insane when you think about it, right? I gave it a 10 out of 10, but honestly, it should be higher than that, right? I ran out of slots. It's just really, really good. Plus, telepathic communication is really, really good. We of course have our resistance to Charmed and Frightened, which is a really nice defensive feature. We have the flexibility in how we cast our spells. Maybe it's not the best, but honestly, it's pretty usable, and I could see it coming in a clutch situation and really making a huge difference. And then for our high level features, I mean, Revelation in Flesh is not bad. That gives us a lot of versatility in ways that a lot of other subclasses really would love to have, especially just at the cost of 1 sorcery point. And yeah, I mean, our final feature isn't the best, but it's okay. It's usable and could set you up for some big damage or removing several creatures from the field at a time. So where do we rank this? Honestly, I really think that the expanded spell list carries this so much that it has to be a 10 out of 10. And honestly, I know that could be a little weird for me to rank it that high, but the fact that it goes in and completely corrects arguably the biggest flaw that the sorcerer has cannot be discounted, and it's just that good. And anybody who's played one of these before, I think you would understand just how much of a difference those extra spells are going to make. So that is our ranking for today. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Later this week, we are going to be building one of these together, and I am very much looking forward to that. Until then, stay safe out there, stay healthy. We'll see you later. Bye-bye.